All right, guys, welcome to the channel. Quick note before we get started today. This is my 100th video. I think I've been doing YouTube for close to 2 years now. So pretty awesome I got that far. Thank you so much to everybody that's watched even one video ever. You know, God, is it nerve-wracking to do YouTube, and hope that anybody out there appreciates anything you can do on your own. I certainly have come a long ways. So my first couple of videos, I had no idea how to edit or create thumbnails. And it shows to the point where at least I'm trying to do somewhat decent content for anyone that watches, trying to have some fun. That being said, this is my 100th video. I'm going to try to do my top 10 video games of all time. Let's go. For the effect. All right, so guys, just before we get started, I'm going to try to not sniff. I'm trying not to say a lot during that video. I am terrible at those things. I think they're just like nervous tics with me actually being in front of the camera. I feel like it was much easier when I had my son, just because it's nice to have somebody, anybody, and he's also, you know, a goofball and we have fun together. Since he became a teenager, he's too cool for me. I get it. So is everybody else. So I'm flying solo. I still want to try to do content and have fun. Well, let's see how it goes. I do have some stuff planned. This video was super hard to make. I gotta tell you, man, everybody that plays video games, of course, can ramble off a whole list of games they love, games they really like, appreciate, games they enjoy playing with other people. It's very easy to do that. But when you are trying to boil it down to just 10 games that are your favorite games, my God, was this hard. I think I had a list of, you know, I don't even know how many games, 50, 60 games for 2 weeks that I just sat there with because I was too afraid to leave a game out. So it was just very hard to get to this point. That being said, I am not a huge fan of videos like this when they do honorable mentions, like if it's a top 10 and then they have like 12 or 13 games. I just feel like that's like a cop-out. And I would love to talk about more than 10 games, but I'm not even going to do honorable mentions. I'm just going to give you the 10. If I did like a top 100, that would have been much easier, to be honest. It would have taken longer, but it would have been easier to do, so I wouldn't feel like I'm leaving anything out. I'm sure I am still leaving something out that, you know, this list will be ever-changing, because I'm going to come across a game and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to put that on my, you know, that should have been one of my top 10. But these were games like when I sat down and I wrote out the list that popped in my mind right away. Some of them I knew for sure were on the top 10. I knew my top 3 before I even started writing the list. Some of them were very hard. Some of them were very hard to leave off. But this is what I got to. I'm going to just, you know, show you what I have. I have almost all the physical games or like something to show you. And I'm just going to talk about it just a little bit. Just to kind of, you know, explain why it's on my personal top 10. That being said, this is a very personal list. It's not like what I believe is the top 10 video games of all time. I completed Elden Rings this year, and as difficult as that game is, it is probably one of the top 10 games ever made. Same with like The Last of Us, the first one. I haven't played the second one. Controversy aside, you know, I heard it's a huge improvement over the first one, but the first one too, I think was on a majority of people's top 10 games of all time. A game like that isn't going to necessarily make my list because it was a beautiful storytelling and there were so many good things about it, but just that style of gameplay where you're almost more taken along for a ride or the show than you are like being immersed playing a video game. It's just not my personal style, where I really appreciated the first one. I loved it as a game, but it's not going to make a top 10 list for me. It would, you know, once again, if my list was much longer, that would, I'm sure, be somewhere on there, but it just didn't quite make it to this. Okay, let's just go. So number 10 is actually the only game I don't have anything physical to show you guys. And I consider myself a console player primarily, but this is actually a PC game all the way back to the late 90s. It's a video game called Age of Empires 2, and it's basically just like a simulation game where you take control of an empire. I remember in the game, it's been so long since I played it, but there are a bunch of different races from back then, like the Phoenicians, I remember, Egyptians, Romans, all those ones, and they all kind of had different attributes that kind of twerked what you could do it within the town, or what kind of troops you can make for battle. Basically, the point of the game is you start off and you got to start going really fast, collecting resources, building up your town, building up defenses, building up your army, and then like taking over surrounding areas. At the time it came out, the graphics were pretty impressive and the gameplay was amazing. But I think what made this game really special for me is one of my best friends in high school. His dad was oh man, he was kind of a, like, I hate to use the word nerd anymore, but he was a nerd like us and he had money. So they actually had 3 or 4 computers in their house connected via landline, which for anybody that's watching this that doesn't know what a landline is, first of all, I hate you for being that young. But before the internet and Wi-Fi, you had to connect computers together, you know, with an actual cable in order for them to interact with one another. So it was very difficult to do, and especially to have PCs, all, you know, enough PCs powerful enough to run something like this game. I remember my computer at home at the time could barely like do dial-up AOL or run Minesweeper, so it certainly wasn't going to play Age of Empires 2. But one of my best friends, they had multiple computers in their house that could run it, and this game was so good that you could actually play with other people, either against them or on the same team, like cooperatively against like some computer-controlled characters. So it was just so much fun. We spent hours, you know, in a different room of the house yelling at each other. I'm sure his mom thought we were insane, but, you know, they weren't set up next to each other, so we were all over the place in the house. It was just some really good times, and it is a really good video game. I have no idea what ever happened to it. I didn't really follow the history of it. I've never seen Age of Empires 3. There could be one that I just missed. I know, like, Sid Meier's Civilization, I think is somewhat similar, but I've never played any of those. But this was just a very special game for what it was. All right. Now, number 9. This one might be, I don't know if it's controversial, but I think some people are going to roll their eyes or think this one's a really terrible pick. But for my number 9, I have Super Mario 64. And this is just one of those plastic cases I bought at the time. It's got like a Banjo-Kazooie character on it, but I have still have my original manual and video game. Back then, nobody really kept cardboard cases. Of course, I'm kicking myself now, but I have a lot of the games in cases like this, at least. At least I was smart enough to buy this. And I kept the manuals, but stupid enough to get rid of boxes. Anyways, Mario 64, does it look the best now? Absolutely not. Does it play the best now? Not even close. But when that game came out, it was absolutely revolutionary. It really changed not just for Nintendo, but for every system and company started emulating Nintendo at that point. They're the ones that really brought 3D to the world, to modern gaming at the time. It was an absolutely amazing game, and it wasn't bare bones for them either. It's not like they just figured out how to do a 3D game with one joystick, by the way, but it was an amazing game with tons of extras in it. And I think one of the reasons it was so special to me is this also, once again, this is how old I am. The game came out before the internet was like a big thing. So you couldn't just sign on to one of, a dozen websites to find answers to video games or YouTube how to do something. So in order to beat the game, I forget what you needed, but it was something like 80 stars, but there was 120 stars in the game. So of course, all the kids in the neighborhood are trying to be the first one to do it. As far as I know, I was the first kid in my group of friends at the time to collect all 120 on my own, playing for hours and hours, just searching around the castle, inside each portrait, each little mini world. It was a fantastic game. I had so much fun, and it really blew me away. And it set the stage for so many other games on 64 that it was the first time like 3D games were like, oh, we were blown away. And you look back now, it's how bad some of the character models, the faces on some of these games were terrible, but they were phenomenal for the time. And I still love Mario 64. It's still actually my favorite 3D Mario, probably because of nostalgia. I don't care. Still my favorite. All right. Number 8. Now we're going a little further than 64 to the Super Nintendo. This is all I have for it. But Secret of the Mana. This game was super special too at the time. My favorite type of game are turn-based RPGs, but there's surprisingly few of them on my top 10. And this is one of the ones I was surprised that I still look back at this more fondly and would play more than other games at the time, or even games later that are games I really, really had enjoyed. I think this game's super special because the sprite work is amazing, the music is amazing. And I was kind of blown away, even at the time when I was a teenager, about the depth of how you could level up the weapons, or some of the spells weren't like a major part of the game, but you could use them the right way. You get different costumes for your characters, which, is like pretty common nowadays, was not so much then. But there's like so much to the game. I gotta be honest, I don't even really remember the whole story. It's been so long since I played it, but I remember being absolutely blown away when I did play it, and I still, look back and can't think of any flaws I had with the game. Just how much I loved it. So this one was a tough one because I don't have like the personal nostalgia for it like I have like Mario 64. I would imagine if you polled a bunch of people, if you gave them the choice between either one of those games, most people would pick Secret of the Mana. I would pick 64. But this is definitely a better game, and there's a lot, of the RPG elements to it that I'm drawn to. So I think that's like the best reason why I can explain why that made it, as opposed to some other RPGs. All right, now right back to the 64. I thought I would have a lot more PlayStation games on my list. I've always had PlayStation. I love PlayStation, but there's not a lot. It turns out some these old janky games are some of my favorites. When I really started sitting down and like trying to be honest with myself, what I liked the most. This one is Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I think it would be very difficult to choose between this or Majora's Mask. But this one, obviously, with the story, I think the time mechanic for Majora's is what would deter most people. It's what deterred me from picking that over Ocarina. But Ocarina was another one like Mario 64 that I guess you wouldn't consider open world by today's standards. But when that came out, this was like an open world game. You could go anywhere and do whatever. It was absolutely amazing. Plus, it's Legend of Zelda, which is my favorite franchise. And it was just a phenomenal game. It still is. I think it's one of those games where if someone says they don't like it, people get offended. I don't get offended. If somebody's like, I hate that game, I'd be like, I totally get it. It didn't age the best, just like Mario 64. I think that's one that if Nintendo ever gave a proper like HD remake to, that it would be phenomenal. But once again, is that even necessary? I don't know, because it's such a perfect game, even for the graphics that it had, which, by the way, at the time were pretty damn amazing. I remember several times just being like, oh my, when you're watching like some of the cutscenes, you're like, oh my God, this is like phenomenal. And now you look at it, you're like, ugh. But that's where we were. It was like the best possible thing in the world at the time. All right. Now we are on to number 6, I believe. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, 6. Little drink. Okay, so this game is another one I know a lot of people appreciate. And some people might scoff at a little bit. Totally fine, I get it. When I bought this game, I kind of bought it as a joke. I didn't think that it would be very good, but I love RPGs. Like I said, they're my favorite type of game. More so turn-based RPGs compared to action RPGs. So all my games have been action games so far, so obviously I say that and I sound like an idiot. I think if I did top 20, 11 through 20, I think 7 of those 10 would be Final Fantasy games. But I don't know, there just weren't a lot on this, and this is one of those. Okay, anyways, that's a way sidetrack. I got this because I thought it would be like funny, and it turned out to just blow me away from the very beginning. The amount of effort and the art style and just like, I don't know. Anyways, I'll just go show you before I give it away. But it is Super Mario RPG for the SNES. This is my original copy. I actually have the manual still somewhere in a box in the back of my basement with a bunch of other old manuals. I almost laughed picking this over like Final Fantasy 3 or 6 or whatever you want to call it, or a lot of the PlayStation Final Fantasy games that I absolutely love. But this game was really something special. I think in some ways it was a more like simplified RPG, but at the same time, there were elements to it that were quite challenging. Now, of course, you could get like I think it was the red shell and the shell armor, which just absolutely made Mario a beast, and that kind of made the game go to easy mode. But there were very challenging fights, especially if you didn't overpower yourself up, which I always do in RPGs. I love feeling overpowerful. But man, even the story with this and the art style that they pulled off, it really makes you wish that, Square and Nintendo carried on instead of starting to do all the Paper Mario stuff, which those are great games, but my God, would I have loved a proper sequel to this game. And just the fact that it went from something I thought would be kind of funny and goofy to being one of my favorite Mario games ever. Actually, I guess according to my top 10, it is my favorite Mario game ever. Just totally blew me away. I love it so much. It's one if I had time to play video games that aren't even on my backlog, or that are on my backlog, and then get back to this, I would definitely play this one again. One of the best RPGs ever made, in my opinion. I think because it stands out more than like your standard RPG with new fantasy characters that are created and a new world. Those games are almost always phenomenal, and I love getting into those little worlds for a while. But the fact that they were able to take Mario characters everyone knows and loves, from very simple platformers to sticking them in this game and doing it so well, man, I loved it. So anyways, yeah, Super Mario RPG. All right, now for number 5. This game came along, I think, at like the right time in my life where I wanted this thing exactly, and that is World of Warcraft. This is the original collector's edition when the game first came out. This is my original box. It actually used to be dented in a lot more because it was sitting in storage, but it's actually bounced back into pretty good shape. And I did nothing to do that. But yeah, this was an awesome collector's edition when it came out. But in terms of the game, it was right towards the end of college where I was finishing up, and obviously I was getting out, so I didn't have a girlfriend, I didn't have responsibilities, I was just working, so I had money. So it was the first time I got a gaming PC, and it was when I dived into this online world that I didn't know how desperately I was looking for. But the fact that you devote so much time and energy towards developing one character, all their abilities and spells and their armor, man, you have to grind dungeon after dungeon after dungeon to get one drop. I loved it. I love the online aspect of meeting people, joining a guild, like just getting lost, going exploring the world, collecting materials just to make one item that took you like, I don't know, a couple days to collect all the items, or materials to make it. Doing the same dungeon over and over again, that's so hard at first, and then you level up 2 or 3 times and you get a couple pieces of gear, and then you guys just breeze through it. I loved that game. Just how much more interactive it was with other people. Like the online community was phenomenal. I actually played that game for up until my wife told me she was pregnant for the first time. And then that is when I finally quit World of Warcraft, because I was probably spending about 8 hours a day, like 3 or 4 or 5 days a week. It was an obsession. It's by far the game I've spent in my entire life the most time playing. And I couldn't imagine, unless I get, when I get old enough to retire, that I would ever spend that much time devoted towards one game again. It's absolutely phenomenal. When I did give up a few years ago, I did try to go back and rejoin the game with one of my friends who I played with back in the day. And the game was very different. It just didn't feel the same. And I didn't really have the same like interest in it, I guess, as I did in the beginning when it was, I don't know. It just felt very different for me. And the people that play it, I'm sure they still love it. I didn't have a hard time. After, I think, 2 months, I told my buddy, I'm like, yeah, I'm done with this forever. That's it for me for World of Warcraft. But still, absolutely phenomenal game. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows about World of Warcraft. I don't need to explain that to anyone. But for me, it was just the right time in my life where I could put all that time and energy into it. And yeah, so many good memories of like doing big raids on Friday nights with people that I only knew from the game. But it was you made good friends, so it was awesome. All right, so number 4, here, right back to another game from Blizzard, is before World of Warcraft, when I didn't have the best. This is another PC game. This is actually my third and final PC game, which I can't believe 3 PC games made it onto my top 10 list, because I consider myself a console player. But this game is super awesome. It didn't have the online aspects to really like push it up higher on the list for me, because I think it would have been better if I was able to do it. I know it had online functions, but it wasn't as easy back then for most people with like normal janky PCs like I had. Anyways, I haven't talked about the game, or haven't shown you the game, or talked about it specifically, but it is Diablo 2. 2 is better than 3. I will stand on that hill. If you like 3 more, I totally get it. There are things that are better about it, but it's not a better game. Anyways, I bought this, I don't know when, at some point during my youth, I was irresponsible, and I lost it. So I ended up buying it again. And then at some point, I think I lost that, and I bought the one with the expansion pack. So I have 3 copies of the game. I don't need 3 copies, but I have them. I also picked up, not that long ago, I think I did this in a collection video, but a very cool kind of guide to it. I don't know if it's considered a strategy guide, but it's a guide to the game. Diablo 2 was awesome. It was very dark and, gritty, and it, like, it's supposed to be. It's demonic. It's Diablo. Like, oh, your kids are worshiping Satan. So yeah, I loved it. I love the fact that so much stuff dropped constantly, and you're constantly powering up your character, even leveling up and putting points into your different statistics wasn't as much fun to me as just getting new gear. And even as bad as the graphics were back then, there's the little changes to your character. If it was just like, oh, look, that helmet's more gold. Oh man, I don't know. I loved that game. I spent hours and hours just re-grinding the same areas trying to get better gear. Phenomenal. I don't even know what would you call it. I still consider it an RPG. I think there's another term people use, like a looter slasher looter. I don't know. It's phenomenal. It still holds up. I did play the remastered that came out only digitally on PlayStation for a little bit with my buddies. It was great, but we didn't want to devote a ton of time into that because we're looking forward to Diablo 4 now. That's something I'm sure I'll sink way too much time into. I hope it's good. I hope I like it more than I liked 3. That's all I can say about that. But Diablo 2, for now, is my favorite Diablo game. Okay, guys. My final 3 games. I think these are, for the most part, interchangeable, but number 1 is definitely my number 1. But 2 and 3, these kind of could go either way. So I'm just going to say this one's my number 3, but it could just as easily be my number 2. And this is a game that I got to relate briefly, tell you guys that, I'm 40 years old. And when I saw this game, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to relate to this. But I think the selling point for me actually was Spider-Man Homecoming. So Spider-Man's one of my favorite characters of all time. But when that movie was coming out, we were watching Iron Man and Captain America. They're guys closer to my age. And I didn't know if I was going to relate to Spider-Man anymore, about a kid in high school dealing with high school problems. I'm kind of old for that. So same with this game. I didn't know if I was going to relate to high school kids or if I was really going to be able to like get immersed in the story or care about them. That being said, the game is Persona 5 Royal. I've never played Persona 5 Vanilla. I only picked this up when this collector's edition came out because it was like dirt cheap. I think it was $70 or $80, $75, somewhere in that range. And it had a lot of stuff in it. So I thought that was a good deal. And I'm like, I'll check out the game. It looks cool visually. Even if you don't know anything about Persona, the game looks pretty sweet. The graphics, the style is pretty impressive. Then I started playing the game. And oh my God. People say it's a long RPG. I think I put 130 hours into it before I even knew it. It was just a game that I made sure I set time aside to play with my busy schedule. Games I'm playing now, I'm like, oh, I don't have time. And it'll be 4 or 5 days sometimes before I go back and am able to put another hour or 2 into it. This game, every day I made sure I had an hour or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever to play the game. It blew me away on every aspect of gaming. The visual style is one of the best I've ever seen in any video game. The music is phenomenal. And I'm a guy who, I appreciate music in video games, but I don't think I hold it as important as other people do when they talk about videos, which I always find interesting that they focus on the music of some games so much. But this game, man, does the music just kick. It is awesome. That being said, it's a turn-based RPG with awesome mechanics that I absolutely loved. The characters, I loved all of them, even Morgana. I could even, understand his point of view, like why he was so annoying. I understand in the vanilla he was more annoying, telling you to go to bed all the time, and he served that function. But these characters, even my son at the time started watching, and he, with the story segments, he was even talking about, oh, I can't believe that this person said this, or, oh, this happened to this character. It just really sucks you in, and you start to really care about these not real people. I know there's a lot of criticism with the game that the middle kind of is drawn out. I pretty much disagree with that. I think the storytelling was so good, and you kind of set the pace yourself, like how much you spend in dungeons grinding, or how much time you spend on the social aspect of the game. I didn't think I'd care about the social aspect. I'm grinding and grinding in the dungeon until I can't do it anymore, and I get forced to do the social parts. And I start off, I'm like, oh, I just want to get back to playing the game, to doing the dungeons. And then I get so sucked into doing the social parts, trying to level that stuff up, and hearing about the stories, that I forget about going back to the dungeons. I loved everything about it. It really reignited my passion to go back and try some other turn-based RPGs. It's a genre I kind of fell out of at that time, a few years ago. But I still love this game so much. And in fact, if you watch the channel, I collect a lot of these figures now. I've started collecting, if you can see this shelf over here, or Detolf. I've got a large SMT collection. This is the game that really drew me into that. It's somewhat niche of a franchise, but man, it's amazing. It's such cool franchises, and there's a lot of other cool games. None of them really hold any weight compared to Persona 5 Royal. In my opinion, some truly amazing games. I have played Persona 3 Fez. I have not played Persona 4 yet. That's one I will get down now. It's finally coming out on the Switch. I really can't wait to get that and spend a lot of time and compare it to Persona 5. But as of right now, this game just is absolutely phenomenal. I love it so much. Yeah, I don't know. I could talk about this game for a long time and delve deeper into it, but this is just a top 10. That's as quick as I can do it without going deep dive. Okay, so number 2. This is a game. Oh, guys, sorry. I got to take another drink here. Wow, this video's getting long. I'm sorry. Okay, so number 2. This goes back to, what was it, 2017. And for Christmas that year, for whatever reason, every single person got me a Target gift card. Target, I shop at Target, sure, but more than anywhere else, no. I don't know why, but every person got me a Target gift card, to the point where I think I had like $400 in Target gift cards. And I was seeing all these commercials for the Nintendo Switch at the time. And this is a point in my life where the only system I really had that I played was my PlayStation. My kids were still kind of little. I was, finishing up school and finding a job. Really, the only game I played on a consistent basis at that time was whatever new Call of Duty came out. And I only got it to play online with my friends. And when I say consistent, I mean I probably spent an hour to 2 hours a week playing that, and that's like all the video games I played. Mine's like whatever stupid stuff on my phone at the time. So I really wasn't big into gaming. In fact, back from what I said before, when my wife told me she was pregnant for the first time, when I was heavily involved in the World of Warcraft, between that time and 2017, 18, I really didn't play a lot of video games. I was very busy. Working full time. I was going to school trying to get a degree so I could get a better job. And we had little kids. So it was definitely my, hobby of video games was definitely on the back burner, and that was totally fine. That was, something I just knew was not, not at the time. Anyways, I got all these gift cards, and I told my wife, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to buy a Nintendo Switch with this money. By the way, this is a time in my life where I didn't have any money. I was, I'd get paid, and then my wife would pay bills and be like, okay, you have $17 until you get paid again. I'm like, sweet, I'll get gas. And this is also a time when you could get gas for $17. So I didn't have money for that stuff. But I got this $400. So I'm like, what else do I need from Target? So I bought a Nintendo Switch. I got 2 video games. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, is that what it is? Which is a phenomenal game. And then Breath of the Wild. Legend of Zelda. It's my favorite series ever. I'm like, I haven't played a Zelda in a long time. Let's give this a go. So, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Let's see if I can grab it here. Got this big old honkin' boy. This is the collector's edition. If you see this whole detail over here, all Legend of Zelda stuff. This game absolutely blew me away. It did so much for me in terms of getting me back into video games at a time when mentally I didn't really have a desire or I wasn't thinking about getting back into games. It just kind of happened naturally with getting a Switch. But it reignited my passion for video games in general, just wanting to start playing them again. And it is a masterpiece of a game. I think for it being on a system like the Switch that isn't the most powerful, but I'm not dissing on it. I love the Switch so much. But it is not the most powerful system. But to have a game that looked that good and run that well was just a work of art. It was phenomenal. And the gameplay in it is truly something special. I think it's still the best open world game to explore in. Just the fact that you can climb walls and the physics mechanics in that game are just so much fun to mess around with. Not to mention the world that they created. I think it, in terms of Legend of Zelda, a lot of the lore and story to the whole overarching story to all the games is really kind of done more so through the fans and, all the peripherals that come out, the books and whatnot. They don't have a lot of heavy overarching stories in most of the Zelda games. But the story that they created in this one was so good. And that's where I differ from a lot of people. A lot of people say that, there was no story. They didn't like it, but it was there. You just had to find little tidbits to put stuff together, but a large part of the story was the open world. It was just, this is the world as it exists now. It's a post-apocalyptic in a way, but it was phenomenal. I loved every minute of that game, and that's another one that I spent well over 100 hours in before I even realized that it was that long. Just absolutely loved it. It's still a great game. I did get the DLC. I didn't finish it because I'm saving it for right before Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, so I can get back into it and get the mechanics down again and get good, and so I'm ready to go for number 2. I did spend a lot of time. It was hard for me at first. I died a crap ton in that game. But when you finally start to get good, like where you kill like a Lionel for the first time, you're like, oh yeah, it's like such a satisfying moment. I didn't even mind the weapons breaking mechanic. I felt like it made sense. And really, like, the weapons, they're nice, but it's more about your skill level, what you're able to do, than the actual weapons. So I didn't mind that they broke. I didn't have a problem with that. Phenomenal game. If you are on the fence about Breath of the Wild, even if you don't like Zelda games, it's not like a traditional Zelda game. It is and it isn't. It has enough differences that as much as I love all the other Zelda games, I'm like, keep going in this direction. It's absolutely phenomenal. Breath of the Wild. Okay, my very last game. And so Breath of the Wild and Persona 5, they're very recent games. Of all the games I've played in my life, these come out in the last couple of years. They're so good, but they take full advantage of being modern games, having all, learned from the past and taking advantage of, the newer technology and whatnot. This game is all the way back to the original PlayStation. I remember going over to one of my friend's houses after school one day, and he was playing it. I'm like, whoa, what is this? And he, showed it to me and was explaining to me. I went the next day and bought it for myself. And this was one of the first games that, before there was like any talk of like 100% completionist, around the time of Mario 64, because I guess I 100% of that too, that, being a completionist, at least where I lived, wasn't a thing. Like, nobody really talked about doing that. But this was the first game I devoted myself to that I had to, like, 100% collect every single little item and do everything in the game, which, by the way, I still have never done. There's one spell that, like, I just can't get. I know how you do it. I can't pull it off. Someday I'll sit down and do it. But anyways, this game is absolutely phenomenal, from the art style to, once again, the music in it's really good. The worst aspect, I think, is the storyline, because it gets convoluted the more it goes on. As many times as I played it, I still couldn't tell you a cohesive story from to beginning to end, but it didn't matter because the gameplay was phenomenal. And that game is Final Fantasy Tactics. This is my original copy. I don't know if you can pick it up in the video. Oh, right here, you can see there's a bunch of cracks in the original jewel case. Back in the day when they couldn't figure out anything better to do than these really hard plastic jewel cases. But the disc is in perfect condition because it's my original. I did finally find this, like, I think like a year or two after the game came out, kind of when I was done playing it for the first time. This is also one of the only games I have replayed from beginning to end multiple times. But I found a strategy guide. One of the things I loved about this game when it came out is the art in the game is really good. The pixelated characters and everything, but they used profile pictures from whoever the artist was for this game. Oh my god, I love the art. But here's some of the main characters. It's Delita and Ophelia, I think. Or no, what is her name? Alma? I can't remember now. It's been so long. Let me see if I can find some more art. Well, so like, I don't know. I just loved the art style of all the characters, all like what you could do in the game. I mean, with these different characters, oh my god, if I start talking about it, it's going to be another half hour just me talking about Final Fantasy Tactics. But I had never played a real strategy game before this one, and I just got obsessed with leveling these characters up. And there were so many different job classes and so many cool abilities and things you could do in it. I just spent hours just leveling up all the different classes and abilities just to max everything out on every character. I loved it so much. It was, I think, the first like RPG that I extra deep dived into, where I enjoyed every part of it so much that I didn't want to just go through the motions and play it and get to the end and beat it. I wanted to perfect it. All three of my top three games, they're all like perfect games to me. I have little nitpicks, and if I was going to be completely fair and honest, if I gave it a score out of 100, none of them are 100. I don't think any game is 100. But even the little flaws in the games, to me, don't detract them from being perfect. But Final Fantasy Tactics, like, anytime, oh man, how do you explain a game that means so much to you as a person and you remember so fondly of? It was just like, so it's, to me, such a perfect game at the time, and it's aged so well. It still plays, you can't really make a tactic game like that play any better. I guess maybe like when you're loading into summons, that wouldn't take so long, or little things like that, with the technology can get better, but the game itself plays perfect. And there's so many amazing things about that game, even from the enemy designs to the way the whole, each battle plays out. It's just you're so engrossed in it the whole time, if you can get into Tactics games. Now, once again, I can see somebody, doing the first battle and being like, this is really slow and really boring, and not enjoying the game at all. I can get that. But for me, it was just like the perfect, where I can sit back and relax and enjoy the fight. I can plan everything out and actually, utilize my skills, in comparison to something like Elden Ring, where I think I'm good and I die in about 2 seconds. Still a phenomenal game. But Final Fantasy Tactics, like, checked off every tick box at the time. I think it was like one of the last games I played in high school, and it was just, a game I sunk tons of time into. Once again, for me to spend that much time on a game that's not online playing with friends, keeping me motivated. But I had to do everything in that game, and trust me, there's a lot, even for a PS1 game. It was absolutely phenomenal. Anyways, guys, I think this video has gone on way, way too long. If you watched the whole thing, I really appreciate it. Those are my games. If you have any thoughts on any of those, like, even if one of them you really hate, I would love to hear why you hate it so much. That's totally fine. You can hate all of them. I would love to hear that. But if you loved one of them, I would like to hear about that too. Just what you liked about it specific. But yeah, guys, if you watch the whole thing, share something. And if you did watch it, thank you so much, because I didn't plan on going this long. But I'm glad it's not even longer, because I could definitely ramble about these games. Thank you guys so much for watching any of these videos. Once again, this is my 100th video. I can't believe we made this far. It's been a lot of fun. I'm still not 100% confident being in front of a camera and just talking, that I have anything unique or special to say, but I love video games a lot, so I'm going to keep doing it. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time.